Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Commissioner Status Update meeting. Today's date is September 9, 2025. The time is 10 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. I want to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? There's just one, and that is because of a conflict, that we were going to move item 5 to item 1. Go into executive session, then come out, and then complete the meeting. Is there any objection to that?
No.
It's fine.
Okay, hearing none. We will do that. Public comment. Would anyone like to speak? Come on down.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Hartman for the record. Today, I hope to hear the following topics in discussion on the SROs. Hopefully, there can be an explanation of what the roles and responsibilities are between the counselors and the school resource officers. Also, I mentioned before that Mr. Mike Nelson, the Deputy Superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District, is willing to work with the commissioners and the sheriff's office to see if there's more that the counselors can do as far as the workload that could be involved with the school resource officers. Hopefully there'll be an explanation of what do the school resource officers do all summer when there is no school in session, and during the holidays like Christmas and Easter, or a Labor Day or one like that. I mean, do they get it off like the teachers do? Hopefully there can be some kind of discussion and explanation on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to our business. Item 5, it's airport related and it's an executive session, and I'll take a motion to enter.
I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061F.
So be it. Commissioner Eberline? Aye. Commissioner Duncan?
Aye.
Chair Matari?
Aye.
And Dave, I'll call you on your cell.
Okay, we're back from executive session. It's 10:11. I'll take a motion to exit.
I move that we exit executive session with staff to proceed as discussed.
Second.
Commissioner Eberline?
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan?
Aye.
Chair Matari?
Aye. Okay. So we will move to our first item, which got pushed down because of item 5 being the first one. School Resource Officer costs. It's a discussion item, and we have Under Sheriff Brett Nelson here.
Good morning, Commissioners. Under Sheriff Brett Nelson for the record. Again, I was asked by the board to bring this back before for discussion for purposes of giving some direction to our business partners to include not only the school districts but also NIC going forward as to how the board would like to proceed for fees assessed to the SRO positions, our lieutenant assigned at NIC moving forward, since this will give us, going into this new fiscal year, quite a bit of time for them to gather their thoughts and then more importantly enter into discussion and negotiations with the board.
Thoughts?
These positions are community benefits, so if we are now pricing Kootenai County out of the SRO market because of the other agencies who fill these roles at less expense, I think that we should rethink that, because it is definitely a benefit to the county to have these roles where during the off time, they're able to be used in patrol, and that's when we have a lot of busyness, is during the summer, when these positions are now freed up to provide additional law enforcement service.
And just out of curiosity, when do these positions do their training? Is it during the school year, or is it typically in the summertime? And who, does another deputy get pulled off the street to backfill that SRO position if the deputy who is the SRO is doing training during the school year?
No, traditionally, the trainings that they've done most recently have been a basic SRO school and an advanced SRO school, as well as a DARE school, and all those were the first week after school had ended, they went down to Meridian for some of that training.
And what about the regular post training, updates and things like that? When do they typically do
They do
that?
their in-service training along when those in-service dates come up, and so yes, but we do not backfill for those dates
Okay.
that they are out of the school for that. That's kind of one of those conditions of, you get them all the time except for when we have these things of need, and that's a true need for them to keep their certifications to be able to provide service to the schools.
And what about vacation time? Is it uncommon for them to take vacation in the summer, or do they typically take it during Christmas break and spring break?
Well, again, we've never mandated you shall take vacation, we've allowed them to
No,
say
no,
if you're
that's not my question. My question is geared towards the level of resources, because if we're going to say that we have deputies in the summertime, but they're going on, they're doing their training, their SRO training in the summer, and they're going on vacation, then we at least have to be honest about that. As far as mandating, I don't really care about that. It's just how it often works.
Right, I was getting to there.
Okay.
We encourage them to match the school year's cycle, so that when the school is off, they should also be bringing their times while the school is off as well.
Okay.
But that doesn't preclude the fact that, summer for anybody is usually their kids are out of school. That's the time that they want to go do things, or spring break. And so as such, do they sometimes wait and hold those for a different time frame? Yes, but
Yeah.
again, we try heavily to say, well, we need you to work this summer as well. That's the whole intent. So please mirror the school schedule as best as possible.
Okay, well, I understand the intent. The question is what actually happens. There's the reality of it, and then there's the intent. So, and my whole issue with the SRO program has not been that we shouldn't be doing it. That's never been the case. My issue is that we don't do a full accounting cost of what it really means to the county, meaning that we're taking a deputy off the street, we have to backfill. It's an additional staff member that's not being used for patrol, that will get their COLAs, that will get their steps, that will get all those things. right? And so what is the fiscal impact to that? Because there's a limit, there's a cap, a ceiling on how much revenue can come in. And so the question is, do we want to make sure that that revenue goes directly to the patrol officers, the deputies there, in the form of higher pay, more competitive pay? Or do we want to enter into agreements where we don't generate enough money to offset the cost, and therefore that actually reduces the margin available to go to the deputies as a whole? We're putting ourselves behind on pay because of the fiscal limitations. And that's what we don't have, is that conversation, you know, and how stretched are we on the street, you know, because the people in the county are deserving of a certain amount of patrol. So there was a period of time where patrol was down significantly, right? 20, 30% or so. So does it make sense to enter into SRO contracts or to continue them if patrol is down that much? If patrol is full and there's no issues with money and we're recovering, you know, most of, if not all of the money that we have to expend, then the question is, do we want to backfill? And does it make sense to do that stuff? And that's really the whole point of me bringing this up, is not to say no, but to say, let's look at the entire fiscal impact and how is it going to affect your deputies in future years as far as available money to give for competitive pay, to do the longevity type programs and things like that. Because I want the guy who's driving the patrol car to get that money first before we start subsidizing other contracts with other taxing districts. In all fairness, they have the ability to generate money, you know, and so it's a form of cost shifting onto the county that I don't believe we should be accepting if we can avoid it.
The other balance in that is relief. So having more deputies means people have to work less overtime and they get a little bit more balance in their life. And so there's been several departments since I've been here who've said, we don't need a pay raise, we need more bodies in chairs because our quality of life is not, couldn't spend the money if we had the extra money. So there's just that balance that I want to look at, trying to get, you know, partnerships with these different agencies in order to share cost and have more bodies.
And, you know, Commissioner Duncan, you bring up these points, but they don't really make sense sometimes. And what I mean by that is that contracts mean we're allocating personnel to a particular job. There is no way to just pull people out of a contract. Now, if we have a set number of folks who are supposed to be in the patrol division doing actual patrol, then as long as we can keep that full, then you can achieve that balance. But if they're short and we're pulling additional deputies out of the patrol and moving them into these contracts, I don't even see how you're ever going to achieve that balance, because you have to pull them away from a contractual obligation, which means, for example, with the city of Hayden, you know, with the deputies we dedicate to them, I don't see how you can just pull them out and act like the city of Hayden will be okay with that. Or if we just pull deputies out of the SRO program, which the schools are paying for, to balance the shorthandedness that we already have, you know. And I always appreciate it when you look at me like that. I wish the camera could see it. But the fact is that, you know, we should be focused, in my opinion, on filling out the patrol deputy division first, and get the county served, and then every other contract after that, if we can backfill these positions and we have that discussion and we know what the fiscal impact is, then I'm all for it. I am completely for it. But I kind of get the sense that right now, and this was discussed last week in status update, that the priority was somehow the contracts, and then the county and the districts, especially the more rural ones, kind of fell at the bottom. They're the ones that suffered. And I believe it should be the other way around, that it's the county first, and then the other obligations, if we can meet them, we do that. And if we have the money for it, great. That's just a matter of priority of how we look at it. Mark, do you have any thoughts on that?
This is a tough call.
Commissioner Skip, if I could just add one more thing. You know, again, many of these have been put in place years ago, and we've made strides over the, you know, many years to get them from 60% to 65% to 70%, and we do lead in that category. You know, we're often said, hey, you know, compare what others are doing, and that's what we should look alike. What we do have, compared to other agencies, we're getting 70% where there's one agency only getting 50%. I mean, there's just, again, it's comparing everything else we try to compare, right? Other agencies do it slightly different. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that we are leading in that percentage of request as far as monetary, return on that to ensure. But, and again, and that's not saying that we shouldn't make a move, and that's pretty much what we're hearing. You know, this board seems to be the first one to kind of basically give us a new direction to say, well, that's all well and good, but we want you to redirect and go negotiate with them with these dollars in mind. And that's, if that's the board's direction, that's fine. That's just what we're looking for. Is that your direction to say, yes, moving forward, we want you to go back to them and say, it's this much, it's the overhead included, no different than Hayden. A lot of it's, if that's the board's direction, that's fine. We'll champion that cause, and that's, we're not trying to say that we shouldn't or should not. It's we're just asking for the direction. Is that the direction you want us to tell them that we want to go in, or not?
How about this? A couple of questions. First one is, when do you say when? How many vacancies in patrol? Because you said these contracts have gone on for many, many years. How far down in patrol do you have to be until you say, we can't fulfill this SRO contract next year. We need this person on the street.
Well, to be honest, we haven't sat down and said, if we get to this number here, we're going to go cancel that contract. It's always been, we've done more with less all the time, just to ensure that we're trying to balance both sides of the scale of, do we believe that the safety in that school is very important? Yes. So are we sacrificing over here some to do that at times? And then, hopefully that pendulum swings of, yay, we got our staffing back up. That's not as much of a, and with those having been in place, we've kind of had something established there. Do we now go tell the school? I know that you've gotten used to having a resource officer for multiple years there, but now this year we can't, or halfway through the year we're canceling that because we're running short. And we just.
But at some point,
if that's also kind of a new direction, we need to realign with saying, okay, we're going to have to put a line on it to say, if it gets to this point, we got to cut it off.
I guess the question is, you were kind of at that point to some degree, it seems like, because if you're 20% vacant, I mean, that's a pretty significant amount of vacancy. Wouldn't you agree with that?
No doubt.
So that's why I asked the question. Where's your number? Where do you hit that? And then if you accept the fact that 20% vacancy is okay and you want to do the SROs, then how, as Commissioner Duncan said, do you balance work life? How do you make it so people aren't doing so much overtime that they actually don't want to stay anymore because they're missing family days? And that's why I say, it seems prudent to have those numbers in place, so that by continuing to enter into these contracts, by continuing to pull resources off the street, you're actually creating a lot more pressure on the patrol side, because they have to pick up that slack, in essence, more mandatory overtime, things like that, because you haven't expanded if you have all these vacancies. You're just trying to fill the vacancies to get to like a net neutral, if you will. So that's the first question. And then the only other question is, if you knew you had $2 million that's going to go into your budget next year, and continuing the SRO program would cost $400,000. Out of that $2 million that could be used for deputy pay, is that okay? Is that acceptable? Because it's not necessarily what the board wants. It's what the sheriff's office wants too. And the sheriff's office draws over 40% of our budget if you pull out solid waste. And so that. And when the sheriff's office comes before the board, they have a lot of asks. I think this year was about $5 million, right? And I think the board tried to accommodate as much as we could. So, but again, it's finite. So what do you want? Do you want to focus on the deputies getting paid the most, and so you can keep the best and the brightest, and then whatever's left over, you want to, add for expanding contracts, where you can get some economies of scale? Or do you want the contracts first, and whatever's left over, would go to the sheriff's office, knowing that we're losing money on these things. So I would argue that the sheriff's office should drive that to a degree. And then the only other thing for the board is just to see the complete fiscal impact, of the cost of the SRO, the cost of backfilling, and how does that affect COLAs and steps moving forward, at least for 1 year. We get that all the time whenever we make an HR adjustment, and I would consider this the same thing, an HR adjustment.
So can I just clarify? Because what it sounds like you're saying is the sheriff's office can agree to enter into these contracts at 70%, but keep in mind, next budget season, that's going to have an impact that may cause us to say no increases for your staff because you only return 70%.
Well, it's not absolute, but it digs into future revenues that would be available for staff or equipment or other things.
And I would say that we're missing a huge key piece, and that would be the constituents. Overwhelmingly, the constituents have approved school bonds to have SROs in the schools. So I want to keep that in mind, that the community does want more officers on the streets, and not just that we have the best and the brightest paid the most, but that we have, trained officers who will serve the community well.
And something that's great when we're fully staffed. And the one agency that always seems to be fully staffed and does well at poaching our own deputies is Coeur d'Alene Police. And I would argue if they want to incur all that expense and do all those things, let them. But what I'd hate to see is, again, we talk about human stories. My human story when I first, one of the reasons I ran for county commissioner was because the sheriff's office was not properly funded. The staff were not getting a pay that was commensurate with the industry. You started off at what was it, 11,000, 10,000 behind on day one with Coeur d'Alene, and in 5 years you were 22,000 behind?
That sounds correct. I don't have.
Yeah. And so when that shift leader, gets another resignation, he knows he's not going to get a replacement for at least a year. And that's what we have to avoid having happen, I think. And that should be the number one priority over any contract at that point, in my opinion. That's how I look at it. So it's not a no pay raise or anything like that. It's just that there's less available pie for those that are there if we engage in these things.
And remind me how many officers we've lost to Coeur d'Alene in the last 4 years?
Well, I don't believe we have, but again, that's because the board has been gracious in getting us up and continuing to drive us forward to remain competitive on all levels. That is a huge fear that we can't go backwards on that. We have to keep that train moving forward so that we don't lose any, to those. But, and again, especially the ones that we do lose to those, a lot of times are very promotable risers within the agency. And that has been proven. We did. The ones that we have lost down there, 7 of them became sergeants pretty quickly in their tenure. And that's, again, the main reason, yes, we do drive that we have to be competitive, to ensure that we don't lose those that can benefit our agency for the 25-year career.
Yeah.
And for clarification, I do know of one deputy from the jail that went to Coeur d'Alene, not only to go to Coeur d'Alene, but to work with his father, who was a Coeur d'Alene police officer. So
Yeah.
my last 3 years.
Thank you.
Well, that's really where I stand on it, from a fiscal perspective and from the perspective of not letting us fall into the trap. For 1 or 2 years, we'll be fine, no problem. But as 3, 4, 5, 6 years goes down the road, that's where we fall into the trap. It's slow. And saying in business is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that's how these things work out. And that we did the analysis as well. Over a 7-year period, we lost more than half the deputies within 5 years. More than half. I just don't ever want to see that happen again in this community, because to me, there's no difference between underfunding the sheriff's office and defunding it.
Correct.
Well, it was not all for pay, so people leave for a variety of reasons, and, with COVID, a lot of people just changed.
It's fair to, I guess, you're always diminishing it to a degree. There's always normal turnover. There's always normal turnover in an organization. That you can expect. It's the additional turnover that really tilts the scale. That's what makes it painful and hard. And that's what you want to try to avoid. So I understand your general statements, but you're always going to have that normal turnover. It's when you have the additional turnover that makes it, that tilts it over the edge and leads to failure. And it's little tiny amounts that have huge impacts on the bottom line. And you have to appreciate that. I'm sorry, but you do. Does anyone have any other comments they'd like to add on this? Sounds like there isn't. But a fiscal impact, I think, would be good to include that. All right, well, that concludes item number 1. On to item number 2, law enforcement contracts with cities. It's a discussion item. It has my name here, and basically the gist of it is this year, Hayden sent us a proposed contract for FY26. And, one of the things that I don't think the county ever wants to engage in is entertaining other people's contracts for services that we provide. And if we're going to get into the business of providing these kind of services, we should have a boilerplate contract that details the terms of service. We should have a rate that is set by the auditing department, and then the sheriff's office should negotiate the level of service based upon how much the city's entities want to pay.
The auditing department or the BOCC?
The auditing department, because they are the ones that actually give us the cost. And it's not unusual to do that. It's actually very standard to do that in some of the larger communities.
I'd like to have that list,
The
because
problem-
you had been saying that the board needs to negotiate the price. That's what you've been saying
No,
with
I've
Hayden.
not been
and
saying
now-
that. I've never said that. The auditor sets the rate. The auditor sets the rate. If we negotiate price, it becomes arbitrary. We have a price for Dalton Gardens, a price for Hayden, a price for Spirit or Athol or something. They're all different. What's the basis for that price? If they wanted a deputy with 10 years of experience, there's a certain rate for that. If you want a deputy with 1 year of experience, there's a certain rate.
I'm not saying the BOCC comes up with the own number. I say that we use the information from the auditing department, then the BOCC decides what that should be going forward for our contracts.
Well, that's fine, as long as we can agree that for this year, that's the rate.
And I don't know that we've ever had a total agreement. We've allowed you to go present things to the city of Hayden for their contract stuff, but I don't know that there's really truly been an agreement with the whole.
Well, the
commission.
agreement to my left is that losing $700,000 was a good deal for the county. And the agreement to my right was that you should pay what you're getting for. And that's where I believe.
Well,
is
thank
that-
you for mischaracterizing that.
Well, that's exactly what happened with the mayor of Hayden after he gave his presentation. You said explicitly you thought it was a great deal for the county. So, and it was all.
Compared to laying off all those officers who currently work in that position.
Well, that was never stated. You thought it was a great deal. That's how you explained it. And so, all
I
I've
use
been.
those words, great deal, just curious.
I asked, do you think it's a good deal for the county? And you said yes. So the point being is that, I don't believe we should be giving more service than what they're paying for. That if it costs us a certain amount to provide this service, we should pass that cost on fairly.
And part of the missing key to that, which KCSO is working on, is being able to do an apples to apples comparison to say, this is how much service we, this is how much service we provide to the unincorporated county. These are the calls for service. These are the calls for service that happen in Hayden, and this is how much that we recommend service that they get. And then that KCSO is able to acknowledge or give the data to to Hayden to say, this is exactly what you're paying for. Because in this Bonneville and Ammon contract, they do have measurables and they do have a true up. So if we're going to go down that road, we're gonna have to true up with Hayden and say, you ended up getting this amount of service and this is what, you know, you need to pay. So I just want to be aware of, it's a little bit more complicated than just saying, here's how much we're going to charge you. That's what you're going to get. We have to have measurables on the back end. And until recently, we really haven't been able to get in depth. But my understanding is we're working towards getting some in-depth stats. Is that correct?
Are you talking about like stats that would reflect a minute for minute worked, or stats that are just crime analysis stats?
Crime analysis.
We provide that monthly to Hayden.
But do you do it for the county? So we can compare the unincorporated county with the city.
We can certainly do that. Again, I sent a thing forward to kind of say, is this something that would be interested for a county perspective on that? We can certainly shift, and I guess the question would be, do you want that county perspective to include Hayden, or you want it to parcel it out and just say, you know, just leave Hayden on its own, and here's the rest of the county?
So it's helpful to understand the difference between the services that the county gets based on their calls for service and their crime, and compare that to the city of Hayden, which is obviously going to be more calls for service, different types of crime, and a different level of service.
I think one of the things that needs to be included is the amount of patrol time in the county, unincorporated versus the city, because it's not just calls for service. There's a proactive element too, which is how much time is spent actually patrolling, looking for stuff, looking for crime, in essence. But I know that those are things that the sheriff's office is working on.
Those are the stats that are the biggest struggle for us, is to get that granular, to start depicting the deputy's movement throughout the day of every minute, where the system calculates the calls for service they're going to and the activities that they're doing. But sometimes if there's any overlap, the system wants to double up on some of the times. It won't allow you to stop one portion and then move on to something else if this activity still isn't completed. And the job just doesn't allow us to be able to say, we go do this first and we cut it off and then we stop. And then we go to this one here and then we stop. You know, it's because there's dynamics of this call may have gotten to where it's at least resolved, but still has more work to do on it. It gets put in a holding pattern and we go over here to handle this one. When you try to go, okay, how much time did the deputy spend throughout his day? It goes back and recaptures that time at time and a half and doubles things. And so the only way to truly try to, at this time we found, is we can take the manpower hours to go through their actual radio history and try to line it up and hand cross out and recomputate those things. The system hasn't been able to just point us, and we've reached out to Motorola numerous times, and you know, even you know, on their granular level, to the people who are supposed to be the bread and butter of this, saying, why won't it? What do we need to do differently? And we essentially at one time we were told, well, why would you think that it would do that? Well, we're still in a battle of that because we need to know this moving forward, these types of activities. So again, we're continuing those conversations with Motorola. We're continuing to look deeper into it. We can give broad perspectives, but what kind of variance do we have in that? Probably 15 to 20% of a variance. We can get close, but we aren't going to be able to get it to the direct minute for minute. Now, if there's the agreeance that we just want to kind of know close, definitely we can do that. We can provide that and be like, here. But we haven't found anybody who doesn't want us to get down to the very basic minute. We keep getting challenged frequently on, I want to know exact. Can't get there yet.
Commissioner, I know you and I have spoken offline in regards to an outside agency that does in fact use the same program. I've directed our manager overseeing Spillman to not only one, bring a representative in to reset, if you will, as to why we can't do what maybe these other agencies are doing, but more importantly, to refine our in-house training so that we can, in fact, gain further knowledge from the system that's provided to us.
Yeah. It's one,
Sorry.
Go
Or
ahead.
perhaps is the board inclined to allocate some funds for us to send a couple people to a couple of these spots that seem to be saying, we've got to solve for you, we've got to solve for you, to be able to sit down there with them and go, let us see how you're doing it on a daily basis. And, you know, is it mirroring it and we're just missing something? Or is it, okay, you do things differently that you have the system set up to do that just doesn't go with our procedures that we do up here?
well,
Sometimes that's the problem. You know, there's different procedures that different agencies put in place that just don't
yeah.
translate over.
There's two issues. It's either there's something wrong with the software, or there's something wrong with the people operating the software. So once you can figure out where that problem is, then answering your question is an easy one. If it's a personnel issue where there just needs to be a better knowledge base of how the system works, and I will tell you that what I saw was impressive. It was overwhelming. It would take a long time. It would take a real data expert to understand all the different fields and all the different tables to run these queries to generate these reports. The last thing we should be doing is hand tallying reports, because you can't reproduce hand tallying. Oftentimes you're going to come up with different numbers if you run the same report for the same time period 3 months later. So I think the question is it the system or is it the people operating the system? And if you can identify that, I will advocate up here strongly to get you the funds necessary to fix this problem, because it's a pretty robust system and it's used throughout the country. So for us to have problems,
I think some of the times we just can't identify that until we go see what somebody else is doing and how it is playing a role in their world to go, oh, yes, that is, or, oh, no, that's not how we even have it set up.
Yeah.
Or can we, or do we, what do we have to shift? So that's just what I would.
I understand that there is a user group that is going to be meeting up here not long from now. And that might be a great opportunity to invite some folks from other parts, other agencies to come in and say, hey, here's what we're doing. Critique us, tell us what we're not doing right, if we're not doing something right. I'd start there. With respect to the contract, though, this is something that I spoke with counsel on, and he sent it out to the board last night. And he's always been a proponent of having a standard boilerplate contract that the county uses to engage law enforcement services or for that service, so that we aren't into this, you know, one contract is addressing a perspective from one city, one is addressing a different perspective. And I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to add, Darren, to this.
Well, Bruce, you commented. I would just repeat what you're saying.
Your microphone, so.
Well, sometimes repeating is a good thing, too.
Yeah, the board's heard this before. The sheriff's office has heard this before. Hey, if we can treat the same people or group the same way, usually we don't have issues. Here we've went down different paths with different cities. We have contracts that just don't look the same. And they have already created at least one problem with one city. So we need to stop doing that. The county really needs to stop doing it. It's our contracts. Let's use our contracts with all of the cities. They should all read the same, other than the line items for the price and the amount. And that's up to the board, the sheriff's office, and the auditor's office to figure out those numbers. But the rest of the contracts should read the same. They're not complicated. And we've turned a couple of them into complicated, confusing, and conflicting contracts.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with using a county contract for all of them. It's
Okay.
very reasonable.
Well, then I guess, Commissioner Eberline, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. This isn't something like you can just punch a time clock and go, you know, for time and expense. It's fluid. with this law enforcement. And so it's a very difficult thing to put together.
Well, I was referring more to the template that the county would use for their law enforcement contract. I mean, with respect to the challenges with the time and the location, I believe the technology already is in the cars that has GPS tracking, date, time, all that kind of stuff. It's just a matter of getting the information out.
So it's like
in
a
way
time
that-
clock there that you're thinking of.
I think it's already, I mean, do your cars track GPS, location and time and all of that?
Well, you'd think it'd be available to be able to do that, wouldn't you?
I'm sorry.
They do, and so to your point of, I think it's, you'd think that the information would be there, but yes, that's what we have struggled with, is to nail down
Yeah.
how do we get that extracted to where it doesn't cost us to then have to go back and hand computate
Yep.
things because it's not there.
So they have the ability. It actually says where that deputy is, location, date, time.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of,
That's old school.
well, but it's something that we just haven't been able to pull out where we could actually show how much time is spent in the city of Hayden, as an example.
Yes, because there's gonna be times when somebody up in Hayden's gonna need to run down here quickly for somebody else to help them out. It's gotta be fluid.
Yeah. On the contract, are you good with having a standard contract for the cities?
How would that work?
Well, it would be one contract from the county, and that contract would be used with an appendix. It was sent to all of us last night with an appendix or an addendum that would detail the level of service, how much is to be paid for that service.
That's a start.
So, okay, well, it sounds like we have direction. If you want to make sure we have something good that we can work with.
So the contract that I sent around is a good contract. It's one that was suggested, terms that were suggested by ICREMP, used by another agency, Ada County, and then one of the undersheriffs, I believe one of his prior contracts in his previous life. Anyway, we took the terms that are pretty standard, uncomplicated terms so that each side understands what the relationship is and covers liability issues. The difficult part is setting the line items for, hey, what the service is and the cost. And that wouldn't be on me, that would be mostly the sheriff's office and the auditor's office. And then, of course, the board has to give final approval on those amounts. But they really should be the same for all cities. I can't think of a reason why they wouldn't be.
Is the sheriff's office okay with a standard template for working with the cities?
Yes, yeah, it's, you know, again, over time, they've been kind of crafted to try to meet some different needs of each particular city and what their driving force, you know, whether it's, we're looking for more of just traffic-related stuff, we're looking for a guy to be more, you know, or, you know, like Hayden, that's truly more of a crime analysis thing. You know, and again, it's probably just been, we're trying, you know, we're networking, these are our teammates, and so over time, it's just, we wanted to make sure that we didn't probably be, I'll just say, offensive to everybody else saying, we don't care anything about what you say, it's this or nothing. And so the moves that we've made on those have, in my opinion, been pretty innocuous to try to say, if this doesn't ruffle feathers on their side, does it really hinder something we're doing? No. But if we have to go to a contract that says, this is it, no ifs, ands, or buts, that's fine. We'll drive that forward and saying, here it is, this is presented. You guys can take it or leave it. It's not.
How would you work out flexibility in time and efforts
You talk, I don't quite understand.
for patrol cars and such? Because,
Well-
you know, just like this incident up here with these helicopters and all that kind of stuff, how would you work that out? You know, when with this last disaster that we had with crime, and with shootings and so on and so forth.
I don't understand how it would work out within the contract.
Yes, there's got to be flexibility, but how would you fix the flexibility?
Well, I believe the contract that you have been presented, I believe it has some language in there that, again, if both sides need to be understanding of, it has language that would allude to the fact that services will be devoted to you every second until something happens that's bad and those services have to be re-diverted.
Yeah.
So both sides have to have a consensus on that, saying, you're not gonna get 100% of that guy every day, all day for the end of time. We're gonna use them over here a little bit. And on the flip side though, we're gonna bring in resources to you, and we're not gonna come to you every day and try to like challenge you saying, hey, see, you got way more than what you did. There's a balance in that, I believe, a consensus that we have to make on some of that language, because guys have to be able to be pulled away for time, but we're gonna add resources back in on the other end.
So it's flexible.
It should be.
Commissioner Rotari, if I may, yes, in regards to the discussion about contracts, I've learned, and Darren and I am discussing this, is the Exhibit A, or what are the addendum, that's where the, if you will, the specifics of the entities will be entailed, but the detailed narrative going into the specifics of the contract, I have no problem moving forward of having a one contract with that separate addendum supplemental added with the specifics for each entity that we go into contract with.
And that's exactly what the exhibit is for, is to address those specifics by the city. But as far as delineating where liability is, what the quid pro quo is supposed to be, you know, the basic level of services, how to address if there's a cure problem, a breach of contract, how that's to be managed, termination, all that kind of stuff is standard and should be standard typically for all the contracts.
Correct.
So, okay, well, Darren, I guess you have some direction on that. You already gave us something, I think. Is that final, unless there's something, Commissioner Duncan, did you have something you wanted to add to it, possibly?
Possibly, but I think the addendum is the important part, and the addendum provided yesterday is obviously not specific to Hayden. So that's the part where, are you negotiating? Is the Sheriff's Department now negotiating, now that the prices are set? I mean, where are we at with that specific one?
Well, I think as far as the level of service goes, that should always be the sheriff's office, because they can recommend what is best to achieve whatever public safety goals that a city wants. You know, what's happened is the board has given Hayden 3 options. One of the options, I think the city wanted to talk about possibly modifying one of those options a little bit. I was just going to share with the city that, you know, as an individual commissioner, not as representing the board, that, you know, depending on what they have, you know, we can talk about it. I would either advocate for or against it, but it's really up to the board to decide what they want to do. My longstanding belief on this is that the city should start paying for the services they're getting. And they've known they've been getting a fantastic deal for years and 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 years. And so that day has finally come. They haven't done much to really, since their levy, they haven't done much to really address the big issue of being so far behind. They've just kind of nibbled at the edges, in my opinion. But that was the intent, was to come back to the board, and they'll make their offer.
Commissioners, if I may, in the interest of trying to move forward with this to establish something here before 2027, would you be inclined to say the undersheriff and I can meet with the city manager and mayor along with Brandy to be able to say, Brandy, give us the numbers and how that equates to the numbers of bodies we can devote, and then we can present that to Hayden, and we can say from there, Hayden, what are you wanting to see? Are you wanting to see the lieutenant? Are you wanting to see, as you put forth, 5 animal controls? What are you wanting to see? Okay, Brandy, does that fit within the numbers? And then come back to you to say, this appears to be where we're coming in at I think the cars is gonna be something that Hayden, I think, is gonna wanna say. So can we bring something back to say they're wanting to do this? Is that a direction you wanna go?
If the clerk is okay, I mean, I don't have too much of an issue with it. I think, it's just a matter of, we talked about this before, the board, we gave them three options. Two were to incent them to get out of the, to allow the county to get out of the automobile business, the dealership business, and the third was if they want to continue to buy cars, it would be a different option. And that was really it. We haven't heard anything back from them on that.
So are you wanting us to sit down with them on that front and say, it's one of these three options?
Well, the city manager had reached out to me and just wanted to talk a little bit and just get some sentiment on my thoughts. But I'm not averse to you speaking to them at all. I mean, I think after I speak with them, it's incumbent upon me to at least notify the board of what was said.
Okay.
Brandy Falcon for the record. I just want to clarify, if I do meet with the sheriff's office and someone from the city of Hayden who's been authorized to negotiate the contract, I'm only going to constrain myself within the three options the board agreed to present to the city of Hayden. And I just wanted to make sure that you're okay with that I would be going into that and using those three options as my basis for.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is to ask the city manager to come before the board, or, we have a meeting and we hash it out in a public meeting. I mean,
Well, it seems like you've pretty much taken the lead on this, so why don't you meet with her today and then find out what it is, if they're asking for some variance from the three options, and then we can address it after that.
That's fine. I'll bring it before the board, at least what their ideas are, and the board can decide if they want to go that route. But ultimately, once that's established, then it's really up to the sheriff's office to hammer out the details on the service levels.
One thing that I'm concerned about is it shouldn't have, we shouldn't be leaning on the rest of the community. Hayden itself has to pull their own chains, and so we can't spread it out to the rest of the taxpayers for Kootenai County.
Well,
It would be unfair.
Commissioner Duncan, did you want to say something?
No, just in agreement, that's what this whole conversation has been about, is for, to give them,
Fair and equitable.
yeah. They're just not going to be able to come up to pay the entire thing this year. They
Well,
voted against it.
They've been able
So-
to pay the entire thing. It's just whatever the thing is. I mean, they tell us how much money they want to spend. We tell them how much service they're going to get for it. And we already gave them the three options, and those options covered the cost so that Hayden could pull its own chain. So it's just a matter of whatever twist that Hayden has on one of those options. I would bring that before the board and talk with you all about it and see if it's acceptable. Anything else? All right, that concludes item 2. On to item 3, transit grants. The only reason I have this in here is because we had these transit grants in the business meeting last week. And the question was, can we not use these existing grants to pay for the operations that we currently have? And I guess there's a couple of things. We have Chad Engel here to talk about it, and Dorian Kumbrick to talk about it. So you want to put up, Chad, thank you for sending us a document today that kind of details what the expenditures are. I guess my first question is, can CARES money be used for any of these items that are listed in the color section up top?
Yeah, so the CARES Act can be used for the operations and the maintenance, the security, and then.
So, yes, correct. The CARES Act can cover these operational costs. We do have the situation where, with the CARES Act, this grant does not have a sunset date. So therefore, these funds cannot expire and then just go back to the federal government. Whereas our normal operating funds, which are the grant numbers that we presented last week, the new amendments for those grants, those dollars do have sunset dates and they do lapse at a certain point. So following FTA procedures and guidance, we follow what's called first in, first out policy, where we use the oldest money and oldest grants that we have first, and then we start using newer grants once those older grants have been expended. So because of the fact that the CARES Act doesn't expire, we have been using our 5307 grant funds, the current ones that were presented last week, in order to make sure that we're expending those dollars that will lapse eventually. So so that the county doesn't lose those grant dollars, essentially. And
So you're saying that the CARES grant does not expire?
correct. At this point, FTA and the federal guidance has been that there is no sunset date. We've checked that a couple of times
Multiple
with
times,
FTA. They are having us extend the performance period out just 1 year at a time. They won't let us have a performance period with an indefinite date, but once a year we have to extend that performance period, basically 1 fiscal year out at a time.
Well, in our quarterly report, it says that the grant period ends 9/30/2026 for the CARES grant.
That's
Correct.
Performance period.
Yes, but we can extend that indefinitely. So we can keep going back to FTA and saying we still have these dollars and we just need to extend the performance period for another fiscal year, but they will only allow us to do that 1 fiscal year at a time.
Well, but are we ever going to spend the money?
Well, we are currently expending those dollars. Per FTA guidance, they've told us they do want us to be drawing down on those regularly. So we are drawing down on those funds on a quarterly basis. In fact, we're all staff, FTA staff time is being paid from the CARES Act funds. So we are expending those funds. It is at a slow rate, but like I said, because they didn't have a sunset date, we wanted to use those older dollars first. So with these new grant amendments that we presented last week, those are using those older dollars, fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 5307 funds that will eventually lapse.
I mean, I guess, the part that just seems a little confusing is the fact that we have what looks to be like 15 active grants. And we're always either extending or entering into new grants. And I just don't understand why we're not expending all of the funds and then just moving on to the new grants, and while we're keeping all of these grants open.
We have closed out actually a couple just recently, and we did have
Three.
some closed out. Yes, and we have a couple that are closing out right now. In fact, our 5310 grant for purchase service funds is almost fully expended. We have the new grant to cover those expenses once that grant has expired. Our truck grant is closed out. Our Intelligent Transportation Service, ITS grant is done. So we're using operational funds to pay for those expenses now. So we closed out all of our phase 2 grants that were still open. So we're slowly but surely closing them out a little at a time. It just takes a little time to actually go through the closeout process. So we are whittling down on some of those grants. Chad, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
So it is a little bit confusing. I understand where the confusion comes in, Commissioner, because we do have to gather funds from different places to pay for different things. So the biggest thing is buses. And so we have multiple grants right now for the purchase of paratransit buses because we have to have that funding in place before we can go and purchase buses. When we go and put the order in for buses, it can take a year. It can take 2 years. When we were going through COVID, it was 3 years. So that's where we have to have this funding in place in order to even put the funding in place in order to put the orders in. So that's why you see multiple grants out there, because we have to make sure that that is ready to go at a moment's notice when those buses are done, when they're completed. And so we could actually get rid of multiple grants if we're able to put in an order for paratransit buses. So right now, we're just waiting so that we can have the funding in place to order paratransit buses. But if we got that in place, we could take care of several grants and get multiple of those out, expended, depending on when the buses come in. I mean, that's obviously out of our control. We put the order
Sure.
in, and when it comes in, then we expend the funds.
I'm just curious, you have on the bottom, underneath the colored sections, total funding needed through FY '26 of $1.221 million. And that's for fixed route operations. But how come it went up so much compared to FY '25? It's like it's about $500,000.
So we're looking at 6 quarters in that figure instead of a full fiscal year, because as we stated in there, that was at the point of quarter number.
Oh,
It was the
According to
end of Q2 that we
Yes.
started
All right.
to calculate, you know, how much we were gonna need to get us through the end of fiscal year '26.
Yep.
Because we have to start the grant process in
All right.
trams at that point,
Yeah.
so.
Since
that
our
wasn't
process
clear.
is taken.
What was confusing is that you went through quarter 3 on the top section, but through quarter 2 on the bottom section. So
Yeah,
you
and
have
that
this
was-
mismatch.
Again, that's what Dorian was saying. That's when we had to start the process in trams. So we have to start that process sooner with FTA because, again, everything that we do takes time, especially when we're dealing with the federal government. Things take time. So we have to plan ahead and we have to get that stuff in sooner rather than later. And so that's why you see that little bit of differentiation between which quarter it is it's just we were trying to express when we had to show and start this process.
Now, can we use CARES money for the training? Was that clarified with FTA?
Training, it should be able to use for, but it was the planning that we were not able to use. Let me-
Planning, that was the
That's the
right
one
question.
that we were, it's not in the grant that we can use for planning, so, yeah.
Okay, but you didn't clarify that with FTA. I know it doesn't say it explicitly.
That we have not clarified with FTA. We looked through all the regulations that they have where it's operations, but they don't explicitly spell out planning. So that is something that if the board was wanting us to explore, we can definitely check with FTA on that. So.
Well, it just seems like we should lean on this CARES grant as much as possible because, nothing goes on forever, right? I mean, different administration, different boards, different everything. You get different policies. So what may be good through the end of next September may not be there afterwards. They may want to claw back that money to pay down the deficit.
Yeah, we can't predict the future, so we don't know. But from what we've been told historically, those funds are not going away.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is basically a lawsuit update. This had to do with the assessor's office, and I believe the assessor wanted to reschedule for another date. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments up here?
I don't remember the exact date that I put this on the schedule with giving them several days' notice. And was under the impression that they were going to get back with us, but I'm sure it's been a month by now. So it would be very helpful to get these updates so we understand where it's at.
If there's anything that I think probably the board should consider moving forward is that if we're going to allocate this money, we should include that we get quarterly or semi-annual updates and not have to ask for it.
I think we did, and people just don't schedule with us, so
Wow.
it's,
And the other thing is that having these discussions in email is not appropriate either, which I believe the assessor wanted to try to give us an update that way. It takes away the board's ability to have dialogue, and we can't have these discussions in email because they're not publicly noticed and they have to be open and transparent for the public. So my hope is that the assessor will find a time that it works well for his counsel and the board, so we can just get a basic update on what has happened with the money that's been spent and what is expected to happen with the remaining money, if there is any, that will be spent on this litigation.
And then the other counsel can easily appear by phone. They don't have to come in person, so that should save time and money.
That's true. So good point. Okay, well, with that said, we are on to, I believe, public comment. Hearing nothing, 11:11, meeting adjourned. Thank you.